Welcome to Mind My Age, where we explore the journeys and wisdom behind healthier, more fulfilling aging. Today, I'm excited to have Dr. Mike Wahl with us. Dr. Mike holds a PhD in medicine and is not only a leading expert in health and wellness, but also a passionate educator, researcher, and advocate for healthy living at any age. With over 2 decades of experience, Dr. Mike has made significant contributions through his work in clinical health, public health, and corporate wellness. He's also known for his innovative approaches to improving health outcomes, including his popular TED Talk on the continuum of health and his engaging health series called Health Explored, which reaches over 50 million homes. Hi, Dr. Mike. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Mike, at Mind My Age, we believe that our minds have the power to improve your physical health and slow down the entire aging process. I want to start by asking you, how old do you feel, and what's your secret to maintaining your energy and vitality?
It's interesting. You ask me on different days, I might answer a different question. It depends. But in general, I'm 46 years old now. And one of the things that I've really learned is how to readapt my lifestyle. A lot of the things I've gone and traveled and learned is purely selfish in nature, and that I want to make sure that I'm aging as well as possible as I get older. It just so happens that there's a lot of people my age, a lot of people getting older. Everybody's getting older every day. So there's a big audience to share those insights with. So how do I feel? I feel really good. Sometimes I get confused about how old I am. When it comes to 46, it seems like I should be slowing down, but sometimes I feel like I'm doing more than I ever have.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I'm actually 45, but I feel like I'm still 30 by the way I live my life and my approach to every decision I make. It's like, you live once, enjoy everything. You're never too old. So, Dr. Mike, let's start with understanding the continuum of health. You've developed this concept and it's been widely recognized in both clinical and public health circles. For our audience, can you break down the key stages of this continuum and explain how they can navigate towards better health, especially as they age?
For sure. And I think that most people that are working in the health sector, so I'm a professor of medicine, which means I teach medical doctors how to be doctors, but at the same time, I don't practice medicine myself. But I worked in allied health for years and worked with all sorts of patients. And what I found was that our healthcare system tends to wait until somebody is sick before they start to treat them. And the reality behind that is that we're always moving in one way or another. No one's 100% sick. Even when they've got a devastating disease, there's other aspects of their health that's still functioning well, and there's no one who's 100% healthy, because every one of us have at least something that's challenging us, right? And about 40% of us have 5 medical conditions at one time. So the reality is the continuum is more along the lines of we're all moving in one direction at a different time. We need to know where we fall on that continuum. And if we have no health literacy, all we're doing is waiting for a bad test from our doctor instead of taking action ourselves and improving our health on our own terms.
So, what are the top three things everyone should understand about managing their health on this continuum, particularly in their later years?
Yeah, I think it's that a lot of us don't realize what our initial risk factors are. So, for example, predisposed doesn't mean predestined, right? So, a lot of people know that we've got family history. So, they assume, oh, I'm going to get diabetes because everybody in my family has. They don't realize that these are risk factors that allow us to take proactive steps to improve our health as we go forward. That's one of the first things. The second thing is that a medical doctor is there to help, but they're way more effective when they're working with you in the process of maintaining health as opposed to treating sickness, right? So a lot of the time people wait until they've gotten to that point when things are already bad, and they should have been addressing it sooner. And then the last thing is knowing where you stand. So, for example, if a test gets worse, even though you might not be in that categorical sick category yet, you might be moving towards it. And give it long enough, you will eventually get to that sick point. So instead, knowing our baseline, what direction are we moving so that we can take proactive steps while it's still easy.
I love that. I mean, you've discussed that being healthy is not a binary state of sick or well. So, what's one common misconception about health that you've encountered in your research, and how can people reframe their thinking to achieve those better outcomes?
Yeah, and I think the research is one thing, but it's a practical experience, right? So, like, I started off my career working in gyms, and then I started working in corporations, working on oil rigs, and with different populations, every population you could ever really imagine. And the thing about that is that it allows you to understand the personal struggles people have with health. And there's a lot of people in the world that are really capable in aspects of their life, and they don't like to have parts of their life they're not so good at, right? And so I think that when they realize their health is declining, they live in a little bit of denial until they finally get that diagnosis of being sick. And so that would probably be the biggest thing. When I say it's binary, and that there is no real cutoff point where the diagnoses you as being sick or me as being sick. It's just, I think that's the biggest insight I've learned from individuals, is that we tend to shy away from things that we don't feel comfortable with. And the fact that we don't educate people on health unless they take a degree specifically into it, predisposes a lot of people to a lot of anxiety around illness.
It's so interesting you say that. I was just reflecting, like, we spent 20 years of our life on education so that we can have this amazing career. And then we spent the next 30 years climbing this corporate ladder. And in those 50 years, like, we should actually be in parallel spending all equal time towards our health. So from your perspective, what's one surprising thing that most people overlook about their health, and what can they be doing to be more informed and empowered?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, we are told to climb the corporate ladder. I did that. My company was acquired. I was in a health field. I worked crazy hours. I sacrificed a lot of things. And I'll talk about a book that I wrote recently. But the start of the book is me looking out of that corner office that everybody wants on Bay Street, right? Like, we went from a little business to being acquired, to being in the building where Suits was filmed. And I thought I had everything I wanted, but all I wanted to do was go home. All I wanted to do was go back to authentic living. And so I think that we spend our whole life making money so we can spend it all reclaiming our health. And if people took a more balanced approach, they wouldn't only find that the experience of climbing that corporate ladder and doing all these things in our youth would be more enjoyable. We'd actually probably do a way better job. Because the most successful people I've ever met in my life are the people that are most proactive about their health, because it's our medium to get us through. It gives us energy in our youth, and it maintains our longevity and our happiness and our social connection later on in life. And, there's one thing called lifespan, right? But the health span is what really matters. And I don't want to live, with 20 years of really bad function. I want to go right to the end functioning as good as I possibly can. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest insights I've seen from individuals over time, is that we just wait to take care of our health, and we should be looking at it all along.
It's so interesting. They say the new CEO flex is abs, not the car you drive or the purse you hold. It's the abs. So I am working on my CEO flex now.
Well, and the other thing too is, like, the companies we work with, I could always tell if we were going to be successful in an organization because leadership would have that attitude, right? So if I was going in to do corporate wellness programming with a large organization and the leadership bought in and they could tell that they got what I was talking about, like our first oil rig we went to was a former British track star who became a rig manager for Transocean, big oil company, and he moved here and he was going offshore and saw the poor health status of the people, and he was like, we need to do something. And he thought completely out of his box. He's like, we need to work on exercise and food and everything. And he got it, and as a result, we were wildly successful with them. And I think that is an important lesson for leadership, is they need to lead by example.
In your practice and research, you've seen how stress impacts health. What's one unconventional method you recommend for managing that stress that our listeners might not have considered?
Yeah, I was really fortunate to look a lot at mental health when I was doing travel. And one of the things that we have a lot of in North America, in particular here in Canada, is nature. And I think that we do value nature, and we think that it's important, and it has an impact on our health, but I think we underestimate just how powerful that is, right? Like, we have like the longest coastline in the world, and water has an incredible impact on our mental health. And just going at the end of a day and looking at water, or having a water feature, even listening to an app when you fall asleep of water, these are all things that actually have a marked psychological impact on us. And the other thing is that we spend time in nature, but we sometimes don't get the most out of it. I went to Tokyo and I met with the founder of forest bathing, or Shinrin Yoku, which a lot of people have heard of. And I've been on a zillion hikes. I live on the East Coast Trail in Newfoundland. I literally was hiking out before we had our call today. But when I went there, they used all five senses while we were in nature. So they would stop you in the middle of a bridge, right? And then they would say, stop and listen. And there would be a waterfall hidden behind a tree you never would have known was there had it not been for them to have a little sign to say, pay attention to what you're missing. We would drink herbal teas and then do mindfulness, conversations. And halfway through, they had cedar chips that smelled a certain way when you walked in them and felt a certain way. And so I think that those are some of the things that we undervalue that are readily accessible and are also accessible regardless of our socioeconomic status, right? Everybody has a little bit of nature somewhere close by that they can immerse themselves in, and it's free and it's easy and it's something that's ingrained into our genetics, I think.
Oh, I love that. When I'm at home with my mom and dad, it's interesting. I kind of observe some of the traditional things that they do where in the mornings, and one recent one my mom's been doing more and more often is uh, every morning she goes outside and just stares at, not stares, but puts her face towards the sun, closes her eyes and just takes the sun in for 5 minutes. And in Hindi, that's called like a Suraj Namaskar, which means like a salutation or a hello to the sun. But if you actually Google what that does for your body, it really awakens a lot of senses and gets you some access to the vitamins that you might be missing.
Well, you just brought up something is like, so I was in Delhi a couple of years ago, and Lodi Gardens is in the center of Delhi. I mean, it's a busy, busy, busy city, like as busy as any city I've ever been to. But when you go to these gardens, it's peaceful and tranquil, and everywhere you look, there's people doing yoga or exercise or laugh yoga or walking and talking and really starting the day off in the most peaceful of places in the middle of one of the busiest cities I've ever visited. So yes, I get that, those mindfulness traditions, and that's the other thing too is that there's a tie to our culture, the things that resonate with us that we shouldn't lose, right? And so I was in Sardinia where the oldest men in the world live, and it's about spending time together and quality time, and they live as long as the women in their community, which is unheard of in the world, and sometimes longer. And so it's finding these things that work within the communities you're in that align with maybe your history or your culture, things you're interested in, and embracing those. And they tend to even have a more profound effect on you because you actually believe in them, right?
It's so interesting. And when you think about like in all of your travels, like what's one small yet powerful change everyone could be thinking about doing in their day to day towards helping them in that health continuum?
Well, I'll tell you a bit of a personal story here. My father passed away, and the reason I started to do all these travels and step outside of the realm of the corporate world and structured research was because he asked me to find happiness. He knew that I had been successful by traditional terms, but he knew that I genuinely wasn't happy. So he asked me to find happiness, and it just so happens that the University of New Brunswick in Canada trains a lot of the senior educators from the Kingdom of Bhutan, the one place in the world that started measuring gross national happiness, and they put it above GDP. So if it's a policy that improves the health of the happiness of the people, they implement it. So I traveled there to learn about happiness to sort of follow through on this promise to my father. And the one lesson I learned from there, I think that is applicable to everybody, in particular in North America, is that they're happy because their definition of happiness is very different than ours. Our definition of happiness is joy or exuberance or massive accomplishment. It's this ecstasy that we experience when we get something new or accomplish something major. Their idea of happiness is contentment. It's having enough. It's being in an even keel. It's being in a nice neutral state. And I have redefined my definition of happiness since traveling there. And I can say I'm much happier as a result of that. So I think that's something everybody can sort of evaluate and say, look, like maybe I'm looking for the wrong thing.
That's so profound because it's so easy to get caught up in I need more, or I need to compete, or I need to keep up with the Joneses. But reality is there's this Indian saying which I'll butcher right now and translate to English, but like you essentially come alone and you leave alone, right? Like there's nothing gonna you can't take it with you. And it's if you can find how simple that statement is and actually adapt it to your entire life, you need a lot less. And you can find contentment within yourself.
An incredible author, Dan Gilbert, who's a professor at Harvard, quoted the Rolling Stones and says, "You can't always get what you want, and sometimes not getting what you want is the best thing because you can then accept it." And sometimes having acceptance allows us to move forward. And that's one of the things that I've learned in my own personal journey is that as our health changes throughout our life, whether we have loss. And there's challenges with our mental health, whether there's physical changes that happen because we injure ourselves or we get an illness. You know, the sooner we accept those things and then focus on the things that are adding to our life, the better we're going to be. And that doesn't mean we have to take a break away from high success. Like I still, work closely with a lot of CEOs and people like that, and I think that's incredible. But I also think that we have to balance the equation a little bit more sometimes.
Given your background in clinical exercise physiology, what's one exercise or physical activity that you believe older adults often overlook but can significantly enhance their health and that is easy to incorporate into their day to day?
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be anything profound or not, but I am all about gardening. I think that gardening. I was in Okinawa, and I met two groups of people. One was called Gardening with Old Guys, and the city would buy them all their plants and all their tools, and they would go out. Some of them were friends for over 80 years of their life. They call it MOA, which is this tight knit community that knows everything about each other, and they garden, and then they would sit back and they would have a chat. And then another woman I met had a special restaurant where she cooked traditional foods. And so she made her own foods. So the thing I like about gardening is, number one, there's a huge sense of accomplishment that comes from gardening. I've learned in the last few years, we have like a little homestead now. I grow all of our own vegetables when we can here in Newfoundland. It's physically demanding, even though it's not really excessively hard, but it's just consistent. It takes a bit of mental dedication. There's a mindfulness aspect to getting up in the morning, checking your vegetables, checking for weeds, watering them. You get to eat healthy food as a result of it, and it brings people together. So yeah, I mean, I love bringing fresh vegetables over to my parents-in-law. Like I'm like, son-in-law of the year sometimes when I come over with a big basket of them. So I think yes, getting out gardening, spending time in nature, and there's all those other things that come with nature too. So we could talk the whole time on that, but I think gardening, whatever you can be, a couple pots of plants is still a great little exercise.
I love that you say that. My dad and I every spring go and buy the seeds together, and we fight over which vegetables we're going to try to grow this year, and he usually wins because his grow better than mine. But it was really cute because in my recent trip back home, I noticed my dad was taking all of this squash that he had grown and handing it out to each neighbor, and it brought him so much joy to just like knock on their door to give it to them. And it was an interesting way for him to kind of be social and have something that he was proud to share. And it brought so much joy to him.
I love that. And I need to talk to him because my squash totally bombed this year. They grew, but I didn't get any squash. But that brings me to a really important point too that I experienced in Sardinia. I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and made bread, traditional bread with ancient grains in Sardinia, with a geneticist mother and all of his aunts, and we made like 100 loaves of bread. And what they do in the community, because it's such a big process, they end up bringing the whole community together. All of his aunts in this case were over, and they made enough for everybody in the room. But they also brought the bread to the people in the community that were too old to make their own bread. So then they went house to house and dropped off homemade bread to the people. Hope you like it. Hope it's as good as yours were. And then we had chats, and it was just such a nice thing. So they could still participate, and that type of stuff. That has huge mental health benefits, and you won't really find that in papers anywhere, right? And that's why I think it's so important to look outside of academics sometimes for these human stories.
Absolutely. And so when you reflect on your extensive experience in public health, what's your thoughts on how therapy can play a role in helping someone navigate that health journey and get, the support they need to start that journey? And what are some of the key benefits you've seen in integrating therapy into a healthier lifestyle?
I think one of the things that people tend not to do is share real experiences. So, after my father passed away, I went through a lot of changes in my life, and I went to go see a psychologist. And to the point that he had a book came out a decade later, and I wrote the back of his book for him. He became a father for me in a lot of ways, and he became really close, and he helped me through things. And after I had gotten past that point of maybe needing acute, help, he just became a coach for me. And I think that's what people don't think about, is that mental health isn't just like our rest of our healthcare system. It's not made for, it is helpful for emergent situations, but it's also super helpful for people when they're just learning to navigate new phases of their life, new challenges that they're facing. And not everything in health has to be at this breaking point. It's incredibly powerful to have somebody when you're going through a traumatic situation who's an expert, who can help guide you through that very safely and effectively, and not give you the same type of support a friend would. You need to have those things, but sometimes you need somebody to question you, and you need somebody to challenge you and make you think in a different way. And that's what these people are trained for. So I'm a massive advocate for that. And I also think that it's for people that are just trying to be better and create resilience. I think often we're waiting until we get down to this line, like I've said a million times. But instead, why not bring ourselves higher? So if something traumatic does happen in our life and we get thrown a real curveball, we've got that capacity in there so that we don't actually get to that breaking point, even when something really challenging happens. So me, I couldn't be a bigger advocate for it. And the book that the psychologist wrote, he wrote a book called A Life Spent Listening, and he was an Iranian immigrant who got his PhD. He's practiced for over 50 years, traveled around the world, was an adventurer, and understands the human condition better than anybody I've ever met, and just incredible. And so, yes, I think everybody could benefit, in particular those people that have been diagnosed.
It's so true that therapy can help you with your past reflection and unblocking the experiences you have had and making sense of them all, but also it can be as simple as helping you as a coach into your future and how to navigate your opportunities and challenges as you go along. And a lot of people don't realize the latter, which is everyone needs a coach. The best athletes have a coach, and so why not have a coach through your aging journey? It could be really powerful.
I mean, if your car's not running perfectly, you take it to a train garage. I mean, your brain is the most complex machine in the entire world. And it integrates with everything else in your body. Why would we think that for some reason there wouldn't be people that would understand that better and be able to help us operate it smoother and give us a maintenance plan and all these other things to keep it in order? I always think about the body like a machine, and except it's just so wildly complex that we need help and we need to educate ourselves. And you can never stop learning about the body, in particular the mind. So yeah, seek out people, any type of therapy, in particular mental health therapy, and that would help our system. We're struggling in, especially with this generation, with anxiety and depression, and then in the seniors, loneliness, which is a killer, right? And so these are all things that could be really that are helped by having somebody to talk to.
So, if you were to design the perfect daily routine for optimal health, or even like look at your own routine, I'm sure it's designed that way. What's the one non-negotiable habit?
Yeah, quality time with my partner. My wife and I woke up this morning. I missed the gym with my workout partner, who I've been friends with for 10 years. And we both slept in today. So I was like, oh my God. So we said, let's go for a walk. So we walked around a beautiful lake down to the ocean, to a little fishing village, and came home, made a coffee, had our breakfast together, talked throughout the day. Rushed down to another walk, a little hike before this today to make sure we got it. She went and got groceries while I came home to get ready for this. And then tonight we're going to cook up, we're bringing a little mobile grill out to a fire pit in our backyard, in our garden, and we're going to have a nice little quality time together. And for me and her, we get a good 2-3 hours together before the day even starts. And I know that's not feasible for a lot of people if they have families and things like this, but my family always said that you need to mine diamonds. My father was a geologist, a diamond geologist. My grandfather was, and my dad was that as well. And my mother was a bit of a philosopher. She still is. Seeing her tomorrow, actually, I can't wait. And they used to say you need to mine diamonds in life because diamonds are small but precious. You don't need a lot of them to be rich, right? And it's those little tiny moments that are the things that make your life all worth it. It's not the accomplishing or the acquiring. It's the holding hands, walking around a lake.
That is so beautiful. I mean, they also say diamonds are formed under a lot of pressure. And I think when sometimes we think that like relationships need to be easy, and if they're not easy, you let them go. But actually, sometimes relationships take work, and it's in that work that you find the beauty too.
Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like I proposed to my wife after having a bilateral hernia repair, which was a sports injury I had. I was an athlete my whole life. I ended up needing a surgery. It was during COVID. I did not respond well. I was debilitated for almost 2 years, which is really challenging for somebody who was active their entire life and always was very physically active. My identity was that, and she was so supportive of me that I literally remember texting my cousin who followed in my grandfather and father's footsteps of geology and got a ring. But see, those are the types of things that that somebody's there for you, and that's what I think people need to sometimes acknowledge about mental health is that there's no wave without a trough, there's no mountain without a valley, right? And so you have to have those periods of opposite in order to appreciate the good times. No sweet without sour, right? So I think that often we're striving for this normality all the time, but that's the beautiful part of life, is to have a bit of a rocky road and accomplish something and come out of it better than you ever were. And I think that there's certain things that we wish we never had, but my father passing was devastating for me, but it ended up becoming one of the most positive catalysts in my life. And so, hey, you have to look at it for what it is because it happened, right?
That is, I love that you shared that, and those analogies are so perfect. There's no sweet without sour is something that made me actually think about Chinese food.
Yeah, exactly. I wish we were having that tonight, but we're not. But
Your health series has taken you to various communities and cultures around the world. What's one surprising health practice you've learned during your travels that our listeners could think about adopting into their well-being?
I think that one of the most interesting things that I really got out of it is Norway. Norway was so similar to Canada in so many ways. Okay, it's mountainous, especially where we are in Newfoundland. It's mountainous. It's snowy. They're so active. Like you go to a nice restaurant at night, no one's wearing a suit. They're wearing Gore-Tex, right? Because they are out all the time, and they have this concept called friluftsliv, and friluftsliv stands for open air life. And I went there to figure out what was up with this because I know a lot of Norwegians, and I couldn't really understand why do they love it so much. And you think about our culture when it comes to exercise and sports, it's about training, it's about perfection. A lot of people hate their way through it, right? When you go there, they have all these sayings, these things they value about accomplishing. If you go up a mountain, you're not going to take a chairlift, you're going to climb up it yourself, and you have the sense of accomplishment when you get up there. And then skiing down is the fun part. But if you go for adrenaline, you're missing the point. It's about the accomplishment. And then they just play. Everything they do is fun. And so we come from this hyper serious approach towards health, trying to achieve anywhere close to a typical Norwegian because they are incredibly healthy people. And they're not even trying. They just enjoy it and they're chilling out and relaxing about it. So for me, that was like, okay, I got to calm down with my exercise physiology background, my elite training stuff I trained on for years and all this stuff. It's like, that's you just got to have fun. And I love when you get the most surprising answer out of something. I'll give you one more. Okay, if I've got time, I'll give you one more. The other place that really stood out to me was Morocco because we went into the desert, and I remember while we were there, we were filming. And I was actually trying to sell a house, and I was doing all this stuff, and I was in the middle of Sahara, and I was like, and I couldn't, I was kind of stressed. And then I thought about it. I went up to a sand dune, and it was completely like the sound of the desert. The guide came up with me, and I said, "Man, it's so quiet." He says, "Well, it's the sound of the desert is the sound of wind with no wind." And I was like, this is wild. Like, there's nothing here. I can't get on my phone. I can't do anything. And he goes, listen, man, we say if you're in a rush here, you're already dead. And and I was like, and then, but what was so powerful about that was that I chilled out like immediately. I was like, you're right. And I didn't worry for like the rest of the trip. I was best kind, but I needed that real profound thing. So first of all, play. And if we're in a rush, we're already dead. And those two things I have not lost.
It's funny. I love that. And it's funny, recently I was watching a comedy act and it was a guy in his 50s saying mindfulness is something that you hear a lot about today. You didn't hear about it when I was growing up because we just had natural moments of mindfulness, like when you're waiting for your VCR to rewind the movie. you know, we
Remember
had
that? He was
this.
like, we had to find stuff to keep us busy. I remember this. This guy's talking about Gen X because we're the same. You would be born in 79. I'm 78. So yes, of course. Like we had to find stuff to be busy. And that's wild. Yeah. I saw that comedian. That was hilarious. I love those things. That's what comedy is. Comedy is just making light of the truth, right?
Dr. Mike, in your health journey, what's one cultural practice you've encountered that you believe could revolutionize the way we think about and approach health in the Western world?
I'm going to cheat and say two because the first one's going to be real quick. But I think that the first thing that I think we really need to readopt is food security in our regions and cooking and preparing food and growing our own food that's specific to where we live. I think that would solve a lot of problems. It would provide us with healthy, natural, fresh food at a much more affordable price in many cases. But that's a big problem to tackle. But I think there's one thing that in North America we tend to shy away from because we are very individualistic in our society. And when you look at how we differ from other parts of the world, one of the most obvious ways is that we don't have intergenerational families, right? So parents that are aging right now that are not living with family, that are put into homes or things like this can be wildly challenging for them. It can lead to increased incidence of things like dementia, loneliness, early passing. And and staying at home allows parents to have a purpose, still have that role in the family, and to be have that respect. It's really important. Plus the integration. It's also great if the family has children, to have the experience with the older adults in the home. My grandparents lived with me growing up, and it was one of the most powerful things from mentorship. I spent so much time with my grandparents. So I think that, we sometimes discard. I know that sounds like a really hard word, but like when I look at other cultures and how they treat their elderly versus our seniors, sometimes we don't see the value that they bring, and how important they can be to our households and to our families. So I think that, revisiting that concept, and keeping families together longer is probably pretty good for everybody's health.
I totally agree. I mean, I was recently reading a study that was done where it proved actually that playing with your grandchildren as a grandparent can improve your longevity and your health span by a significant percentage. And so it's so important, not only just for that feeling of happiness and joy and fulfillment and seeing like your family around you, but also if you think about it from an exercise and like physical standpoint, picking up the baby and putting the baby back down, or like cradling it and moving around, all of that increases motion.
It does. I mean, I met a 102-year-old cowboy in Costa Rica, and he jumps on a horse in like 3 seconds, and he would go work on the ranch and do all the tasks he used to do, like pretty much everything he used to do, just a little slower. But he was wildly sharp, super fast. And when we asked him about like living his family, how does his family treat him? And he was like, they love me so much. And we got home, and his great grandkid was in his lap, and breakfast was ready for him, and he had the milk ready to go, and it was just incredible. He didn't need to work. He was actually quite wealthy because he had built up so many cattle farms over the years, but he had this real sense of purpose. And that was really, really powerful to see. And this guy was sharp as a tack at 102 and fit. And so we've met lots of people like that. And that's a consistent thing, that people that are aging well, and keep their mental capacity, that are the happiest, are the people that still have friends and family around.
It's so true. And then your other comment around um, food security and eating foods that are, regionally grown is so interesting, because like I just spent my last 2 weeks in France, and it was so cute watching people every day go to the local market and grab their fruits and vegetables to be cooked. And every time I'm home with my parents, I'm always threatening to cut up the Costco card, because there's no reason why they need to be buying food for the whole month. and, like it's just not healthy, and there's no reason why broccoli should be sitting in your fridge and not be rotting by week two. Like things need to be fresh and purchased and eaten within the day or two, and that's important for health.
Yeah, not to go on about that, but like my friend her name is Laurie McCarthy. She represented Newfoundland for Canada at a TED Talk in New York City, talking about her book called Food Culture Place. And food is more than just food, right? It's more than just the nutrients that go in our body. It ties us to who we are, it ties us to the people around us, it ties us to our traditions. And we shouldn't discount that. Right. And I think that there's huge value to that. And if there's anything I've learned, it's that celebrating traditions and seeing and experiencing things in a way that has been passed down is really important for people. It allows the experience of eating and celebrating and spending time together to be that much more effective. And I think that's one thing that we discount. It's not just about buying the cheapest, most food we can, or the fastest food we can get. There's a real nice process to it. We went out to the garden tonight and picked some potatoes for the first time this year for our dinner tonight, and that means a lot, to us to be able to do that.
It's part of the day-to-day experience. We don't need to optimize it and shop for the whole week or month. We should actually include it in our day-to-day living with purpose.
Yeah, my wife told me the other day, she texted me, I'm at a happy place. She was grocery shopping because we get our meals for 2 days at a time, and she loves going through the grocery store, and that's her favorite thing, buy fresh food. So yeah, I concur.
So, speaking of living with purpose and empowering health decisions, you've seen firsthand the impact of small, consistent health changes. Can you share a story where someone made some small changes that led to significant improvements in their health? Like, what were some of the key takeaways that you had when you witnessed this?
Yeah, I think that I saw it culturally within small groups of people. I think that when a shared set of values, when things become important to a group of people, you can have a massive shift within things. So I used to go to oil rigs, like I said, and oil rigs are not like your typical audience when it comes to health-minded people. We were out there because when somebody threw their back out, it cost the company a lot of money. If somebody had a heart attack in the middle of the ocean, it's really dangerous because they're so far away from a hospital. And also the foods they were providing, sometimes it was unlimited deep fried foods, especially in the southern United States. So we went out there and we put people out there. We had full time people, and I used to go visit all the time and work out there. And we would slowly work to educate people over time, little tiny, small little snippets of information. And by the time we finished, what we found was the average person just stepping foot on that oil rig because they had to weigh everybody to get on a chopper. The average person lost 5 pounds, whether they talked to us, whether they participated or not, because every time they would go into the galley, they would see what a healthy food is, what the healthy options were, and undoubtedly they try it sometimes. Or their friends were all now walking around the rig at night, so they would just join them and inherently go for a walk. Or and it ended up being like it was with a major oil and gas producer, and it became one of the safest rigs that they had ever had in the world. It became the healthiest rig. They were heralded all over the world for it, and it was all little micro changes. But when everybody makes a change, then that's how we shift culture. And that gives me a lot of hope when it comes to communities that are relying solely on healthcare but don't really take the proactive side of things, that we can create these little microcosms. And I asked Blue Zones research, I said, because they're losing blue zones all over the world because they're being infiltrated by Western lifestyle. Um, can we take these best practices and create new ones? And they said exponentially. We could create them all over the place if we were to start to get these like-minded things. So yes, did I see experiences? Yes, countless. But when I see an entire group of people value something and then see a shift, that's when it was really powerful to me. And that's when I knew the work I was doing was good. And that's why I got involved in media, because I knew I could reach more people that way.
For your media initiatives, like what's one strategy you recommend for people to align daily health habits with larger life goals?
Okay, that's a good question. I think it's that there's 4 stages of learning, and the first stage is called unconscious incompetence. You don't even know what you're doing wrong. You have no idea you're doing it wrong, so you live in oblivion, and it's no big deal. It doesn't bother you because you don't even know you're doing wrong. The best thing you can do is start to learn, and that makes you it makes you consciously incompetent, and that leads to conscious competence, and then eventually become unconsciously competent. So when somebody says to me, I have such a busy life, I've got to commute an hour to work every single day, and traffic, it's brutal. I'm like, that's great. You have an hour a day to listen to a podcast that's going to teach you something about an area of health you don't know. And then just by having that information, that will make you better, because there's very few people that knowingly do stuff blatantly wrong. And so I think that this first start is be open-minded, but people are really good at avoiding things that make them uncomfortable. So get a little bit comfortable with being uncomfortable, learn something new, realize you don't have to be perfect, and that, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. There's a million analogies on that, right? But I think the first stage is just being consciously incompetent.
Love that.
Yeah.
I
You can't
think,
get rid of the information. It's in your head.
well, hosting this podcast sufficiently makes me consciously incompetent
Me
because I'm,
too.
and that's exciting, right? It's so true because it opens my mind up and hopefully the listeners that are following along, like to these other researchers, scientists, doctors that are identifying opportunities for us to improve our health, and we become conduits of that information, but we're also learning and we're benefiting from it. So it's such an exciting privilege.
I went to school for 26 years, and the majority of all I learned there was most of it's wrong. And everything I learned, I've only learned because I've been open to the fact that I could have been studying the completely wrong stuff for a long time. Not that it's wrong, but it allows me to be able to have a different perspective. So yeah, if you think at some point you have all the information on anything in life, then you've likely it means you've got way more to learn than you think. Because I mean, I'm fascinated daily by the human body.
Absolutely. And they say the secret to staying young and healthy is to remain curious and continuously learn, right? And what better topic than your own body and your own health?
Yeah.
So over the years, you've witnessed so many inspiring health transformations. What's one of the most memorable ones you've seen? And what are some of the factors that contributed to that person's success?
Okay, so that's a great question. I think the most interesting ones are when I meet people a decade later that remember word for word a conversation we had about something, and then they turn around and say that they never forgot it, and they were able to apply that, and they told their friends, and this, and they've changed. And I don't remember the conversation, right? And so for me, some of those moments are the really, really special ones, because you have a good intention, just like you with your podcast. You're trying to reach people, you're trying to help people, but knowing that that message landed at some point and that it really made a difference. To me, those are those impactful moments that really stand out to me, and it makes you, I don't know, I think that, like, if you look at Japanese philosophy of ikigai, it says you have to, in order to have purpose in life, you need to do four things. You need to do something the world needs. You have to do something you're good at. You need to do something you get paid for, and something that you're passionate about. And if you can satisfy all four of those criteria, then you've literally got the purpose of life. And sometimes we get three of those from our career and we have to find one somewhere else. But sometimes, I think like you, and I think like me, you're able to find all four in life. And so when you can pass that on to somebody else and they get that bit of enthusiasm about something you love, that's so rewarding.
It's so amazing. Like, and I love the way you reference that book, because that book brought a lot of insight and inspiration to my life. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing this and Total Life. It certainly is more fulfilling than my investment banking career. I can say that.
Yeah, I know what that's like. Yeah, okay, I got you. Yeah, good. Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear.
So in your TED Talk, you mentioned that health is a lifelong journey. For someone just starting to take control of that health journey, what's the most important piece of advice you'd give to them, our listeners, to set them on the right path?
Things change. And what you know today and what works today, you might have to reevaluate in a couple of years. You might have to reevaluate tomorrow. Constantly stay on top of it, constantly be aware of it, not in a way that's like unhealthy or obsessive, but be in a way that it's like a priority, right, in your life, and that you're going to have to adapt things. I can't train the way I did when I was 20 years old. I would literally end up in the hospital, but it doesn't mean I can't modify that slowly over time into something that makes me happy. So yeah, it is a lifelong journey. I think that there is no one period of time where we have to focus on it. We have to focus on it every single day. It's just what we focus on changes.
You have a book that is coming out soon in which you share all of these lessons, in particular on longevity and balancing the continuum. Tell us more about your book. When and where can our listeners pick it up?
Yeah, it's great. I wish I could type as fast as I can talk. And I'm sorry if I talk really fast. That's a Newfoundland thing. I'm from Ontario originally, but I've definitely picked up the East Coast cadence of speaking. But no, we have a book coming out. It's called Health Explored. It's named after our television program as well. It's going to be available wherever books are sold. So Barnes and Noble, Kohl's, Indigo, Amazon. And what it is when we do our television program, it's very visual, of course. And so what we're trying to do is transmit a message to people in a short period of time. But I also kept a journal the whole time, and I wrote messages and interpretations inside conversations that might not have made the show, that I really gleaned a lot from. So we wrote a series of short stories. I think there's 12 chapters on different places that I visited, all with a different focus. Our director for the TV show, his name is Braden King. He is wildly talented. It's just me and him that go around the world, and the quality of the production is something we're very proud of. But he's a super talented photographer. So when the camera stops rolling, he pulls out his camera and snaps incredible photos. So he did the illustrations or the photography. The book is a combination of storybook where I tell my perspective, and then there's tips that people can use, like a self-help book, which is great, like on how to apply that lesson. And also there's a section on the messengers that I met and what they told me, so that everybody who wasn't on the journey could share that journey with me. We're really proud of it. It'll be out in January 2025, but it'll be available anywhere books are sold. It's available for pre-order now as well.
Well, and we'll get you back on when it's ready and talk about some of those stories. And what about your TV show? Where can people catch that?
Right. So right now in Canada, it's airing on NTV on the East Coast, but also in central Canada, like Alberta, and on Yes TV, which goes to Ontario, I believe, as well as some of the provinces out west. It's available on NTV Plus, which is a streaming site, so anybody can access that at any time on their mobile device. You can see it there. And if you're in the US, it's on some PBS stations, so they can check it out there. But safest bet is probably NTV Plus here in Canada.
Awesome. So, Dr. Mike, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. For our listeners, if you're ready to take control of your health and move towards the healthier end of the continuum, stay tuned and click the subscribe button to Mind My Age below. For more inspiring conversations, remember your best years are still ahead. Thank you.